Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sympli Works webinar, Lead Yourself First, Model It to Inform Your Path as a Leader. I would like to acknowledge that we are located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And our facilitator today is Matt Symes, CEO and founding partner of Simplicity Designs. Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Yuliya. Appreciate that. I'm going to share my screen, but as I'm going to ask permission to share my screen, and then maybe I will have some fun with that. Look at that. I now have permission to share my screen. But as we get moving here, I'm going to ask you a question. And there's only a few of you here, but I want you to think about this. Why are you here? Why did you just give up an hour of your time that you could use on multiple things, and you've decided to spend it here with us? You can either put it in the chat or just think about it.
First.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at using Mighty Networks to grow a piece of my business. That's one part. And I'm also looking to scale, and you guys are well versed in that area. So it's kind of a win-win situation for me.
Okay, perfect. Laura, why are you here?
I'll share, sure. I'm here because I've always been told that I'm a leader, but I never actively put much thought into it. So it was something that I was told, but thought that, well, it had some barriers in my career and had me really questioning whether or not I was going to continue, and whether I was this so-called leader, but got in a different position and was able to quote unquote lead a bit, and decided that it was an area that I want to do better at so I can help more people, and thought that instead of being a passive leader, I wanted to be more intentional and learn more about it so I can be more effective.
Okay. Full transparency, and I don't know if we have Rob or anybody else that wants to contribute here, but I asked this question because there are things that I'm sure keep you up at night. And as a leader, I'm sure there are things that you just kind of wander through the day without thinking about why you're doing certain things. Most people get to be in a position of leadership because they outwork a set of problems and they're willing to put the time in. But there comes a certain time where you can't outwork the next set. You only have so many minutes. So you can get better with those minutes, but you only have so many minutes. And I found myself in that position. So, small introduction, Matt Symes. I have a resume and I have a family and all that kind of fun stuff. And I'm involved with a lot of stuff. Some of it's been very successful and some of it is still difficult. So, you look at a portfolio of businesses, you look at a series of leaders that I get the opportunity to work with every day, a series of people I get the opportunity to be with every day. It's fun, but it also requires a different mindset, one that I didn't have for a while. And I'll remind you that, what got you here probably won't get you there. And so, are you coming up against the same lessons over and over again as a leader? Are you articulating the same frustrations over and over again? There's an old adage that the lesson will continue to present itself until you learn it. And so when I find that my complaints or my frustrations are similar day after day, I'm probably in the middle of learning a new lesson. You saw this picture, and then I can show you this picture. This is me at 238 pounds. Very little physical activity in my life, a modicum of outside success, but mostly perception. Doing okay from an income standpoint, but barely holding it together, bluntly. And a lot of things under the hood not working as well as I might like. And I could go into detail. I often do with groups because I'm still learning this stuff. I won't pretend that it's learned, but I will put in front of you a certain set of models today that help me get out of a rut as a leader, and a cadence to those set of models that allows me to reset often and ask myself the questions again. By the way, scaling an organization is no different than scaling yourself. If you're going to scale if you're going to scale an organization, you have to decide where you're headed in the future. You have to decide the core processes that aren't working for you anymore. You got to galvanize a team to create better processes so that you can scale. Processes are nothing more than habits. And habits are damn hard to change, whether they're organizational habits or your own. They're very hard to change, but they are an engine. One of the most important books that I've read in the last 24 months, and this is an add-on to Lead Yourself First, is this one right here. An Earned Life by Marshall Goldsmith, regularly recognized as the #1 coach in the world. And he says this: there are only 3 things that an earned life asks of you. Live your own life, not someone else's version of it. Commit to earning every day, make it a habit, and attach it all to something greater. Those are the 3 things that leading yourself first and earning your keep every day demands of you, right? So with that in mind, it all starts with a much bigger why. And I hope that you have spent some time and will spend some time curating your own why. This is not a throwaway line. This is not hokey. This is not, if you can't articulate this in a meaningful way, I don't know why you're doing what you're doing, leading who you're leading. I have no understanding. And guess what? You probably can't articulate it either. And as a result, the people you're leading can't benefit from your leadership. Bottom line. Leadership will do this to you. It will expose your flat sides. That's what it'll do. And it'll beat on them until you recognize them and find a way to mitigate them in some meaningful way. And most of your flat sides will take away from your upsides, right? I carry that coin in my pocket. It is massive. It is heavy. That is on purpose. Every time that I feel a knot here, it drives me to the pocket, and it drives me to think about that in there. When I look at people who have achieved a number of things that I am envious of, and those have changed over time, but when I look at people who have led successfully and seem to be living a contented life doing it, the one thing they all share in common is an ability to accurately self-reflect. So what is your method for self-reflecting? How are you looking at that every day, every week, every month? How are you doing that? What is your method for self-reflection? Do you journal? Do you have some way to get it out of your head? If it's in your head, that is bullshit. That is not reflection, that is rumination. Okay, and rumination will lead to ruination because you will fixate on stuff that doesn't really matter instead of the whole picture. And I tried to put in a key swear word there to try and wake some of you up and see if that moved a few things. Folks, reflection is only valuable though if it leads to new action. Recognizing that you're doing something that isn't serving you only helps if you're willing to put in the work to change that. Okay, so there are people who, regardless of their material condition, have been able to improve the quality of their lives, who are more satisfied and who have a way of making those around them also a bit more happy. If you're not familiar with this guy's got a YouTube video where there's 100,000 views on how to say his name correctly. Okay, and you can see why at the bottom there, right? Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. It's pretty easy to say after you know what it is, but I still put it in brackets because I can never remember it. He is the godfather of flow, and he actually just passed away. But he is one person who helps people understand how do they get to that state. These individuals lead vigorous lives. They lead vigorous lives. They lead them on the edge of their abilities. They're open to a variety of experiences. They keep on learning until the day they die. They have strong ties and commitments to other people and to the environment in which they live. They enjoy whatever they do, even if tedious or difficult. They're hardly ever bored. and they take in stride anything that comes their way. Perhaps their greatest strength is that they are in control of their lives. You'll see this over and over and over again. People understand how to take control of the controllable, let go of what they can't control. I actually had a mentor of mine once say to me, Matt, there is no such thing as stress. Well, there's all kinds of literature on it. Like, yep, there is, but there's no such thing. Okay, help me with that. He said, well, he said, can you control it? Nope. Okay, then don't stress about it. If you can control it, then do something about it. One of the two, but there's no such thing as stress, right? Recognize how to allocate it and see it. Okay, so I'm coming back to it all starts with why, and I'm doing that quite on purpose because if you don't get to why, reinventing what won't matter. It'll just send you spinning in circles. Okay. Have you ever heard of mental models? Okay. Do you know the images of those people on there aside from Oprah? Everybody knows Oprah. Okay. But the guy in the middle is Charlie Munger, 99 years old, Warren Buffett's 2IC, written a book called Uncle Charlie's Almanac. If you ever want a brain twister, read it. But he's figured out the system. And the guy on the far left is Ray Dalio, writes a huge book called Principles. If you don't know what mental models are, if you don't follow Shane Parrish on the Knowledge Project, if you haven't learned how to incorporate those into your life, do so. Mental models are this. They are the reaction. They are your reaction to the world when stuff happens. They're basically your translation devices. Notice the one I said earlier, when I start to feel a knot in my throat, start to feel that little tense go up, I immediately go to my pocket. Most people, when they feel that, they react out. They let the emotion carry the day, right? What mental models do you have? Are they serving you? Okay. Want to make sure that your mental models serve to guide your life here. Now, I'm just trying to get back to lovely presentation. Why am I asking you to look at mental models? Here's why I'm asking you to look at mental models. Because what I'm about to put in front of you are a series of models to help you decide why you exist, what you're building, what you want to be known for, and then to put in action a way to get at it. Okay. At any point that you want to stop me. Let's take a look here. Here are the models I use. 4 straight models. Ikigai, terrible name, good Japanese concept of what do you love? What's the world need? What can you get paid for? What are you good at? It's an Americanized version of a Japanese concept, brings together an event diagram that I think is really helpful for charting the future. Set of core values, the 4 burners in life in your bucket list. This coming together will help you create a personal aim. I can assure you that if you do these exercises, they all sound simple and they will take you weeks to get done. But can you immediately anchor into your own personal calendar once a quarter where you get away with yourself for a night, for some period of time where you review this, where you step way back and review these 4 models? So let's walk through these 4 models. These 4 models force you to begin with the end in mind. If you look at any great leader, they will start with what they are building and come back to the gap between where they're going and where they are and what are they focused on. It's creating that gap constantly, right? So great leaders start with the end in mind. I'm going to ask you to walk through this. What do you love? What's the world need? What can you be paid for? What are you good at? So here's the problem if you miss it, right? What do you love and what's the world need? That gives you a mission. But if you're not careful, it will also exhaust you and burn you out. Because if you're not good at it and you can't be paid for it, you're going to be constantly scrambling here to skill up and to make enough money. Right? This becomes an anxiety-ridden hobby that you can't deliver to and it can't deliver for you. What's the world need and what can you be paid for? Great, that's a vocation. That's where a lot of people get stuck. They get stuck in what the world needs and a carved out job and what they can be paid for. And they get stuck in this vocation. But it doesn't get you out of bed in the morning. And it doesn't excite you to get better at it. I see people get stuck here. Now, what are you good at and what can you be paid for? Okay, there's a profession. The issue is sometimes that doesn't inspire you. Sometimes the world moves on. I can be good at it, I can be paid for it, but I get paid less and less every year. Right? Inflation's taken a big chunk out of a lot of public service salaries here in the last little bit. Okay, great. Now, what are you good at and what do you love? Awesome. Does the world need it? You may be the best underwater lawnmower that anybody's ever seen. But I don't know too many people who need that. Right? Okay. These become important. It's important. Can you fill this out? Can you fill in all four? Right? And you don't want to get caught on the edges. You don't want to get caught on the edges. And I think sometimes when people look at it and they actually put an X on where they are right now, they go, okay, now I can see why I got a bit of shortness of breath every day. Right? Okay. So can you fill this out? This becomes a bit of the first bit on your North Star. Okay. The next thing that I ask all people to do is to understand what are your values, how you're going to show up, how you're going to play the game. What are your values? And, you know, Adam Grant's done a lot of study on this. Robert Glazier is the same mentor as I do. Warren Rustin built a $20 million marketing firm, flipped it, now does basically values for organizations and for leaders, basically full-time. Has a course online, relatively cheap course online that walks you through how to get to your own set of values. But at the end of the day, your values tell you how you're going to play the game. Not why and not what you're going to do, but how are you going to show up? They force you to articulate that in a meaningful way, right? And where do values show up? They show up in the space between stimulus and response. Something happens in this world and you react to it. This is where I want my values showing up and guiding my response. That split second in there. If that sounds familiar, George Mumford is a mindfulness coach, but he took that straight from Man's Search for Meaning in Viktor Frankl. And if you've never read that book, please do. The first half is about how a man can survive a Holocaust. And the second half is how he can still live with a full heart afterwards. It's an incredible story. If he can continue on in a meaningful way to want to contribute, to say yes to life, he can find a way to do that. I think you can. Okay, so why a set of values? Folks, I'll bring this a bit personal, right? This is my family's set of values, right? It's a G-force, right? Gratitude, generosity, growth, grit, goals, gains, grace. And we have this up in our house. And I can't tell you how many times that these words have guided a discussion with my oldest daughter. Audrey's still under a year, so we can say whatever we want to her, but it's not gonna stick. But with Ellington, we talk about we are generous. We ask every night at the supper table, what are you grateful for? When she falls down, we talk about being gritty. When she wants to go after something, we talk about goals and we talk about the growth mindset. I don't have the skills yet. We won't let her say I'm not good at it. That won't happen, right? We celebrate the gains. And we'd like to do it with grace. Do we always succeed in this? No, of course we don't. But we have a set of guiding values that help us interact with the world. Right? Very powerful for yourself. What do you respect most, right? Like, where do you spend most of your time? Sure, we achieve things. We achieve titles and we achieve goals and all that kind of fun stuff. But we spend 99.99% of our time in the journey. We spend most of our time showing up. We spend very little of our time accepting awards or accepting platitudes and all that kind of fun stuff. So how do you want to show up? This is where getting to a set of values will really help. Okay, so I'm spending a lot of time, and I will spend the first half hour just getting to your personal aim before I talk about how do we action it, right? So we talked about Ikigai to drive a North Star. We talked about a set of values to say, how do I want to show up? Now we're talking about the 4 burners of life. Okay. And it's pretty easy to subdivide your life. I got this from the Entrepreneurs Organization, and it really helped me separate church and state, and a bunch of things in my life. There are really 4 burners when you think about it. Friends, family, close relationships, communities you're a part of. They can be regional communities or they can be professional communities, whatever they happen, they're communities you're part of, right? They might be sports, whatever it happens to be. Then personal and professional. And when I separate the two, professional, think about a bit more of your job and your professional pursuits. And when you think about personal, think about health and wealth to some degree. Okay. So friends, family, close relationships, community, personal, professional. Why do we call them the 4 burners? Very hard for more than one of them to be hot at any given time. Very hard. You try and ride 3 of them at the same time, you'll notice it, right? So are you taking a step back? And we'll do these in quarterly sprints and going, hey, which burner is hot and why? We'll get into that in a minute. But what I want you to do is take these 4 perspectives and I want you to do 2 exercises. One is rather morbid, but the Stoics suggest that this is probably the most important exercise you can do. Write your obituary from those 4 perspectives. And, don't just pay credence to the fact that I should. Go write it. Holy shit, it's hard. It's really hard to write that. But if you start from the 4 burners and write it, you at least have a starting point to say within friends and family and relationships, this is what I want to be remembered for. Within the communities that I care about, this is what I want my memory to be. For myself, and when they looked at me as a person, this is what I want them to say. And for the professional accomplishments, this is what I want them to talk about. Okay. An obituary is really important for understanding a legacy. Listen, at best, most of us are going to be remembered for 2 generations, maybe. But that legacy should be living on in those that you have influenced, right? So it's more important. It's not just about a personal legacy. It's about what you want to infuse. And then the second part, which becomes a lot more fun, is about, hey, 10 years from now, what do these 4 burners look like? This talks to you about the build. If the last one was about your legacy, this one's about the build. What do I want to be able to say about friends, family, and close relationships? What do I want to be able to say about community? What do I want to be able to say about personal health and wealth? What do I want to be able to say about professional? This one's a lot more fun to write down and look at, but it's kind of fun when you step back and you go, okay, I've got my Ikigai clear. I got my values and how I want to show up. I got the obituary written. Now I got the build, what we're going at. And why 10 years? 10 years because people vastly overestimate what they can do in a year and vastly underestimate what they can do in 10. Compounding is indeed the 8th wonder of the world if you get focused. If you don't, a lot of people have 1 year experience 25 times. They don't have 25 years experience. Okay. See that particularly in some of the, almost every profession, but it certainly rings true in the health world and in the education world, etc. Right? It's like Groundhog Day. So where this should be driving a view of yourself in the future, which should give you a gap now between what you are becoming and what you are. Okay, so now I got a gap, which is great. Folks, I always put this in. Bonnie Ware, a palliative care nurse, the top 5 regrets that she heard over and over and over again have powered this book. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends, and I wish I had let myself be happier. There's an arc to life. Don't get me wrong. You get people who are in their 30s and 40s, and they are the least happy. At least when you have a whole curve of happiness and contented, it seems to be some weird curve that goes on. That's actually shifting a little bit younger right now with the presence of social media, et cetera. It's pretty ugly, but think about those regrets. And for me, going through these exercises over and over again, getting clearer and clearer on it allows me, I think, to live a life closer to intention and to not have these regrets. I still make mistakes, all kinds of them. Don't get me wrong. I still take risks that are maybe a bridge too far. I still don't take some of the risks I wish I had of. It's a balancing act. The final bit of your personal aim is a bucket list. List the 20 to 30 things that you want to see, do, and experience in this world. I don't care how small or how big they are, get them down. At least a list of 20, 30, even get it up to 50. And why? That starts to package some of the ways you want to interact and experience this world. It's not to create a list that you can never do. It's to get intentional about some of the experiences that you want to have. So we're almost 30 minutes into this. And what I've asked you to do is start with why. And I've given you 4 or 5 models to work through to create clarity of what you're chasing. Why do you exist? How are you going to show up? What's your legacy? What's the build? What's the bucket list? You get that written down in a journal. You get a first draft of that. You'll be amazed at how being intentional about that, the world will start to conspire to put those opportunities in front of you. Okay, you've heard of the book The Secret, right? What a bunch of BS. Okay, The Secret says just say what you want over and over and over again, and it'll happen. No, it won't. You won't automatically get the skills. You won't automatically know the people. What I will say is this: if you state where you want to go and you create the gap and then you put the work in, the opportunities will come out because you start spending time in different areas. You start committing to different activities. You start committing time with different people. It changes what opportunities pass in front of you, right? Okay, so this allows you to commit to a new identity. James Clear, who writes Atomic Habits, one of the most important authors on how to change things in your life, especially habits, and we are really the sum of our habits, said this: the key to building lasting habits is focusing on creating a new identity first. You got to carve out your identity. You carve this identity out, you then create a different persona for yourself, and that persona does things differently. We are not static creatures. I hope that I'm embarrassed of the person I am today, 10 years from now. I certainly look back on the person I was 10 years ago today and go, wow, okay, you interacted with the world in a completely different way. But if I was the same person, that would really scare me. Really, really scare me, right? Okay, so as soon as you commit to your new identity, you can craft a story around it. And if you do the exercises that I started off with here, you will basically have your story crafted, right? We stick to the wrong thing quite often, not because it will come to fruition by further effort, but because we cannot let go of the way we have decided to tell the story. And we become further enmeshed even by trying to make sense of what entraps us, when what is needed is a simple, clean breaking away. Simple, clean breaking away here, if you do these exercises, will give you a new yardstick to chase. It'll give you a new version of yourself. Okay. The knowing doing gap is probably the largest gap in human history to cross. If we understood this, we'd all have a six-pack, $1 million in the bank, and the environmental crisis wouldn't really be a problem. We probably wouldn't shoot shit at each other either. Right. So this stuff it's hard to beat being human, but there is a way to get at it. And one of the things that I want to make sure to express here is that we are, for the most part, people on this call and people in the Western world are largely facing a crisis of abundance. We have access to too much sugar, too much food, too much dopamine, too much scrolling, too much of almost everything, too much materialism, too much of almost everything. So we are facing a crisis of abundance. The brain is actually not wired to deal with this in any way, shape, or form. It's wired for thousands of years to deal with scarcity. So our brain is set up to deal with scarcity and protection, not abundance and glutton. And we have it now. So if you're going to craft and live a life of intention, you are going to have to move from FOMO to JOMO, from the fear of missing out to the joy of missing out, because you have intentionally decided where you're headed. You are going to have to be happy. We cannot get paralyzed by infinite optionality. Be careful of what you feed yourself. What's your Instagram feed look like? What's your LinkedIn algorithm look like? What's your Facebook feed look like? We have never in the history of humankind been so responsible for curating the environment we need to nudge us to success. Are you curating an environment that will help you cross the knowing doing gap? Are you continually feeding yourself messages that inspire, not beat you, inspire you, right? Okay, let's talk about from intention to action here. 12 months from now, take those 4 buckets that I talked about, take the 4 burners. What are they going to look like at the end of this year? From friends, family, and relationships. You've looked at 10 year. Now, what's 1 year going to look like? What's 1 year going to look like on the community side? Which commitments will you have made to what? Why? What's it going to look like on the health and wealth side? What's it going to look like on the professional side? Can you articulate what a year from now is going to look like? You can see how we're walking from a North Star of becoming to a legacy, to a build, to an articulated 1 year. Okay, you articulate the 1 year. Fantastic. Now, my favorite word is priorities, because when you have priorities, what don't you have? A priority. Never used to be a pluralized word. Somehow in the 20th century, we decided that was a good idea. Folks, you can only really have one priority. And I often tell leaders, I work with leaders who are overcommitted. They often try to put 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag and end up smelling bad. That's a farm reference for you, Laura. And you see, here's the thing. High performers overcommit. They overestimate how fast they can get stuff done. They underestimate the amount of collaboration and time it takes to get stuff done. They are continuously overcommitted, trying to outwork the problems. Okay, awesome. Trying to get you away from that. So I'm going to ask you in the next 90 days, which one burner is hot? Where do you need to focus your time? What one habit are you changing? And what is one item on your bucket list that you're going to knock off? Let's get it down to the next 90 days. What burner's hot? Sometimes you have complete control over this. Sometimes the world conspires to not give you entire control over this. We've all gone through relationship breakups. We've all gone through family drama. We've all gone through professional drama. All that stuff exists. So what burner is hot? Where do you need to focus your time? What is one habit you're changing? Take the 4 quadrants and ask yourself, which is one habit you're changing? And to keep it a little fun, what is that one item on your bucket list that you're knocking off? Right. And I can talk a bit personally about this. As I started to change habit by habit. By the way, the habits are the building blocks by which you make your identity a reality. Your identity then becomes what serves you to drive and get where you want to go. It was really hard. There's still some that I'm working at. There's a bunch. One of the most important things that you need to have on this journey is a someday maybe list. Gives yourself permission to write down shit you might want to do, but not have to start it, so you don't become overcommitted. All right. And that list is pretty important. But in the next 90 days, let's get hyper focused here. Right? What burner's hot? Where do you need to focus your time? You're maybe not changing a habit, but it's your time. Right? I'm going to come back to this and really personalize it in a second. But I want to make sure. Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Can you tell me what you mean by what burner is hot? Is that the one that I'm spending too much time in?
Well, it could be. Or it could be but for a life of intention, you've decided to dial up the heat on one. Now, if one is coming at you, you might have to deal with it. And if that's the case, then what do I need to do to deal with it? What do I need to do to put it to bed? You wouldn't believe how many times people get stuck in the drama triangle. If you're not familiar with the drama triangle, look it up right away. There is this drama triangle that people get stuck in, which is like the victim, the persecutor, and the hero. And the narrative gets stuck in there, and some of them feel good, some of them don't feel good. It doesn't really matter. You're still in it. Even if you're riding in on a white horse, you're still in the drama triangle, right? It's no good. So, don't get stuck in the drama triangle. Don't get attracted to it. This is the way to back away and go, okay, which burner's hot, right? What do I need to do? So that then brings me to the anatomy of a habit. We're going to change one core habit in the next 90 days. Which habit is it? Right. And if you understand the anatomy of a habit, you understand this. There's a cue, which drives a routine, which gives you a reward. Put another way, the FOG behavior model, and I love this model. This is probably my favorite book for changing habits, probably the most important book I've ever read on habit change. BJ Fogg is largely known for a way of testing social media apps. In fact, the founders of Instagram took his course at Stanford and then developed Instagram. But he is largely famous for UX design that addicts you, gets you addicted to different forms of technology. And you went, okay, we better put this on something else. And eventually I intended this for good, but it's starting to get a little nefarious. So I wrote this book called Tiny Habits. You remember BMAP. Behavior change happens when motivation meets ability meets a prompt. Okay. Most people focus and beat the heck out of themselves for not having enough motivation. It's the wrong place to start. What's the prompt? And I'll give you an example. I need to strength train. I hate strength training. I hate it with a passion, like with an absurd passion. There is no discernible delight that I have ever been able to find in strength training. Okay. But I know I need it. I'm over the age of 40 now. Muscle mass is an important thing for me. If I want to increase health span, I've got to find a way to incorporate it. So I said, where's the prompt for me to do something? One of the easiest things for me to do for strength training is push-ups. Okay. It can be done anywhere. It doesn't require a gym, doesn't require much technique, a little bit, but not much. So you lift in your own body weight. It's great. Encourages you to run more, so you have to lift less. Great. So what's the prompt? Okay. And in here in the prompt for me was, okay, what do I really love to do? That made me smile a bit. I said, you know what I love to have? I love to have a coffee. And I make my coffee by blooming the coffee. And when you bloom the coffee, I got the little pour the kettle, bloom the coffee, I get 30 seconds. When that 30 seconds, I decided that was going to be the prompt where I was going to get down and do push-ups. When I started, I did 11. Okay, 11 push-ups. That's about all I could do. Okay. I knew how to do a push-up. That was fine. I didn't have to learn, right? And my motivation was so-so, but the prompt drove me. So every time that I bloom the coffee, I drop down into push-ups. Today, I'll do 30. I'll do 5 times 30 a day because I get to have 5 coffees. I love 5 coffees. Any more than that, I get in trouble, but 5 over the course before 1 o'clock, great. So my prompt is the coffee. I can do it. And you know what? I don't have to rely on motivation to do it. It just does it, right? It does it for me. I've built it in. So that takes advantage of one of the most important things when it comes to curating and creating new habits. How are you habit stacking? Katie Melkman writes a lot about this, how to change. So she really loved trashy novels. Loved them. And she was reading them while she was doing her PhD. If you know anything about doing a PhD, you're not supposed to be reading trashy novels. You're supposed to be reading something else. So what she said is the only time that I'm allowed to read trashy novels is when I'm doing cardio. So the only time she was allowed to listen to them or watch her little guilty pleasure, she connected it to the bike, right? So what she basically said is, I really am motivated to read trashy novels, but I'm only allowed to when I get on the bike. Created rules. By the way, this is something that has helped me enormously, creating rules. I love sugar. Absolutely love it. Jessica can attest to this. I absolutely love sugar. I love it more than a pregnant woman on steroids. Okay. Sugar is something that I couldn't figure out how to get out of my life. It was for everything, right? You get a reward, do that. You depressed, do that. You good day, do that. Bad, it didn't really matter. Just like near chocolate, eat it. I said, okay, so how can I create a rule in my life that allows me to actually manage this? Okay, no problem. I said, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have sugar 5 days a week. That's it. Or sorry, 5 days a month. Not 5 days a week. 5 days a week would be awesome. 5 days a month. Pick the days. Don't care when they are. It allowed me a certain amount of flexibility. I have found that rules combined with flexibility are the best way for me to drive habits. Okay, so how do I do rules with flexibility? I'm a runner now. I run 100 miles a month. That's the non-negotiable. I don't have to run every Thursday. I don't have to run every Saturday. I don't do weights on Tuesday. None of that. There's no ardent schedule. Here's what happens when you create a habit that's tied to a schedule. The minute you miss one, you go, screw it. I couldn't get to the one, I'm not going to get to the rest. Right? So be very careful how you incorporate this. I'll say this later, but I'll say it again. High performers who get to the next level do two things in equal spades: high self-discipline and high self-compassion. If you don't have the second one, the first one will just torment your life. Because you'll have high self-discipline, but then you will torment the hell out of yourself when you don't meet that high level, and your inside voice can be awful berating. There's a great book out right now called Outlive by Peter Attia. He talks about the 4 horsemen of death. He talks about increasing your lifespan, but most importantly, increasing your health span. 4 horsemen of death, in case you're playing the home game: cancer, metabolic, cardiac, and neurodegenerative. Okay, those are generally what we will probably die of. There's a way to get ahead of it. When he talks about health span, one of the most important things that he got to was mental health. High performers are at a huge risk for problems with mental health. Okay. The single biggest change that he made in his life cognitively is every time that he was about to contend with something he didn't live up to, his behavioral therapist, which by the way took him more than a decade to admit to using, said this: open up your phone and write a response to how you would respond to a friend who came to you with the same problem. It dramatically changed the way he talked to himself, which completely changed the game on how he got about living a life of intention without kicking the shit out of himself every time he let himself down. Right? Because that is an ugly place to be. It just totally changed the game. And he thought the exercise was ridiculous. He says it openly. If you want to read or you want to engage in anything and you're not a big reader, Rich Roll did a podcast with Peter Attia that I highly suggest you look at. Tim Ferriss also did one, but Rich Roll is the one where he talks about mental health for about an hour and a half to start. So get on a long drive, listen to that one. Okay. Why am I talking about this? Because at the end of the day, you are going to fail often as you attempt to do this. If you can't have compassion for yourself when you fall down, don't bother starting. You're not ready. You're not ready, because it will just be torturous. Right? Okay. So the essential change reading list, I bring this up because I think that these are probably some of the most important books that you can engage with when it comes to change, because at the end of the day, living a life of intention is about changing often. Changing often requires you to understand the environmental and habitual components of change. It's far more of a science than we care to admit. Anybody who wants to rely on willpower for change, it is a terrible idea. Terrible idea. None of us have enough of it. Right? And what's fascinating is most of this research, I mean, you look at Richard Thaler, he won a Nobel Prize. Look at BJ Fogg, he's largely the brains behind UX design, addictive UX design. You look at Charles Duhigg, world-renowned expert on habit. Katie Melkman, probably the youngest professor ever at Wharton. She's an absolute superstar. And James Clear has lived it over and over again. If you're going to start with any of them, How to Change is the easiest read. Tiny Habits is the most important read. Nudge is the way that you don't have to change at all. You can just create an environment that will nudge you to change. You wouldn't believe how many nudges are in our world that we are just oblivious to. Okay. The next week. So I'm going to move. I've moved from your end game to the mid game of a year to the anatomy of a habit, so that in the 90 days you can focus on one habit to change. Now let's talk about next week. Don't overthink it. It's a bias to action, not motion, right? Remember, searching for a running plan is motion, running is action. Drawing up a calendar of where and what I'm going to do and making it pretty is motion. Spending time with your daughter is action, right? So how do we get this thing from where I'm headed to action? How do we get there? Okay. The final bit becomes anchoring it in the calendar. And you know, I referenced this one earlier, Marshall Goldsmith on an earned life. He's just an old, gentle man who, you know, is regularly regarded as the #1 coach in the world. I love the way he goes about things, because there's a couple core ways to anchor this. The first is the calendar. And I tell every senior leader, don't tell me what's important to you. Let me see your calendar over the last couple of weeks. I'll tell you what's important. So do you have that reflection device to look at the calendar and where you spent it and how you spent your energy? Can you see it? Are you looking at it? And are you letting other people take it over? This is one of the things in this modern world, like, geez, I mean, we wouldn't let somebody just walk into our life, but some reason, because they have our email address, they can schedule us for meetings and send us unsolicited emails. How did that happen? Anyway, be careful. Where you spend your time is what matters to you. Are you intentional about it? So you want to, I don't care what you call it. There's 3 different ways of calling it. The military will call it battle rhythm. Covey will call it calendar of commitments. Some people call it the cadence of accountability. I don't care. If it's not scheduled, it's not happening. That's why I asked you to schedule that one bucket list item in the next 90 days. That's why I asked you to be intentional about your time. Where do you want to show up? Okay. The final bit is, what are you measuring? Okay. I don't know if you can see it. I got my little book here. And on the bottom of my little book, there's a few things that I have written down. Here are the most important personal measurements in my life right now. Number of miles run, number of calf exercises that I've done, number of push-ups that I've done. That's for me personally on the health side. On the family side, I have an S, a B, and a B. How many suppers was I home for? How many books did I read to my daughters? And how many bedtimes did I get to? They seem a little ridiculous to measure, but the reality was I needed to put in the forefront what mattered to me and have an accountability bit to look at. Does this little thing have everything in my calendar? No, but it has the 6 things that matter that day, the 4 to 6 things that matter that day, and the metrics that matter on the side. I've just divided it up. It's a tiny little book, goes everywhere with me. It helps me see and reflect quickly. Marshall Goldsmith talks about, at one point, he had number of compliments he gave his wife as a metric that he needed to anchor, because he wasn't anchoring it. He thought it, but he wasn't saying it. And he went, shit, I got to get that into my life, right? So one of the things that you don't want to really worry about is how ridiculous you might sound or look. This is your life. You just shit what anybody else thinks, right? Remember what I talked about when I talked about earlier about what an earned life requires, right? An earned life asks you to live your own life, not someone else's version of it, to commit to earning every day and to attach it to something greater. Doesn't say care what friends who don't matter think, right? Okay. So a few tips along the journey that make it a lot easier. Some of the quick, we all want tips and tricks and hacks and that kind of stuff. These are some of the things that I've actually found work enormously. Pay attention first to your environment. It matters most of all. Who are you hanging out with? What are you reading? Who are you following? Where are your workout clothes and what are your snacks? What's in the snack drawer? I mean, you sort of reassess these. Kind of changes the water on the beans. Right? They do say you're the sum of the 5 people you hang out with. It's unfortunately far truer than I wish. Don't get me wrong, the old friends are some of the best friends, right? But they just take on a different relationship over time if they're not headed in the same direction at the same velocity as you. It doesn't mean you have to have an official breakup, but it probably means they push from one of the top 5 or top 15 most important relationships somewhere out into the 125. Right? I had a dear friend of mine that we spent almost a decade together. Now we text around hockey a little bit, have a smile at it. Still there. We're just not headed in the same direction at the same velocity. Nothing wrong with that. Love supporting the hell out of his life. He's super supportive of mine. We just don't have the ability to push each other in the way that we did at one time. No problem, right? People come into your life for a season, a reason, or a lifetime. And it's when we make the mistake of the 3 that we really screw it up. They don't have to be big dramatic ends or exits or whatever they have to be. But I would be really clear about who you're hanging out with and why. Where are you spending your time? Where are you showing up? Okay. Use nudges. For God's sakes, use nudges. You want to eat less food, take a smaller plate. You want to run more, trip over your running shoes when you come home. One of the most important changes in my life, I went from cracking a bottle of wine to running 7 years ago. And the most important thing was just having the running shoes out. Did it annoy the hell out of my partner? Yep. Would she prefer that I run than drink a bottle of wine? Yep. Did we deal with running shoes out in the open? Yep. For a very long time. Do they need to be there now? No. Because the habit's ingrained, but it's there, right? So do you have a weekly meeting with those that matter in your life so that you can align where you're headed? Most of the time, relationships come to conflict because of unstated expectations that go unmet and time being dedicated in the wrong areas. Unstated expectations being unmet. So you being fair with your partner? Are we aligned on where we're headed? Are we aligned on what we're doing? You know, one of the most important things that Em and I did was bring this together as a partnership. She went and did hers. I went and did mine. Then we could figure out how we could support each other. One time it almost came together brilliantly and then it completely collapsed. I'll tell you the story. It was wonderful. We said, you know what? She wanted to see penguins and I wanted to run a marathon in South America. So I booked Patagonia. It was great. And then as we further dived into running the Patagonia marathon, that was a terrible idea on my part because it's like one of the hilliest, rockiest courses. It's like the only one that's worse is the one of the Great Wall. And the marathon was 3 weeks after the penguins left. And we were going to do this with a toddler. So, okay, this is stupid. That was a great idea, but it didn't work. So we won't do that. But now you think about some of the things, and I'm going to tell you where it went brilliantly. My 4-year-old had a very, very deep interest in dinosaurs. Looked around, where can you see dinosaurs? 2 places, Drumheller or just outside of Austin, Texas. Okay, neither one of them politically aligned. Austin, a little bit more, not outside of Austin, but Calgary, Drumheller, I'm good. So we went to Austin. But we didn't just go to Austin and do the dinosaur bit. M wanted to climb. They have some of the best climbing gyms in Austin. We made sure that we had a half a day of climbing, and I got in a half marathon up in Dallas, Fort Worth on my marathon training. We went for 4 days. Ellington held a Tyrannosaurus Rex tooth, but I was scared to death she was holding it because I was worried about it crashing down. And they said, don't worry about it. We have 30,000 fossils here. We don't know what to do with them all. It was cool. It was really cool, but we were able to bring together an alignment of a vacation, gone for 4 days. That's it. Did we suffer through a little bit of a long day? Yep. Was it worth it? 100% it was, right? Okay. Be careful of the peer pressure, final bit. They sent out an energy consumption component to a little letter to people. There were 3 things on the 3 different letters they sent out. One letter said you could save money. Another letter said you could be better for your environment. Another one said, you know, you're not keeping up with the Joneses. Everybody's better than you in the neighborhood. Which one of the 3 do you think spurred a change? The third one, nobody gave one shit about the money and nobody cared about the environment. But when you told me I wasn't keeping up to Nancy, that pissed me off and I changed my behaviors. Okay, you can't beat being human, so make it work for you. Make it work for you. How are you making the nudges work for you, right? You want to save more money? Have 10% automatically go into another account. Make it a non-option. Just have it go. Right? You'll figure out. If you have lifestyle creep, you can have lifestyle one that goes back down to what you have. These are all things, if you read nudge, you'll find out exactly how ridiculous humans are. We like to think we're logical. We're not. We're a big bag of water and bones, bunch of rituals and habits, bunch of biases and mindsets. Great. Okay. You will not rise to the level of your goals. You'll fall to the level of your systems. Bottom line, you will not rise to the level of your ambitions. You'll fall to the level of your habits. Right? Some people say it's 30 days. Some people say it's 66 days. The reality is it's longer than that if you don't have a reason for why you're changing a habit, and it's shorter if you do. Right? And the final bit, I said this earlier, I'll repeat it again and again. Be kind to yourself. Be grateful. Some of you know, I live with my father now. I have for the last 6 months as he deals with a terminal illness. I get a visceral view every day of I get to versus I have to. I get to go for a run. I get to walk. Right? Just reframing that, I get to make this lesson plan. I get to have this interaction with my colleague. I get to. If you can reprogram that as one of your mental models, it changes the entire framing of that sentence, right? And remember, life isn't about succeeding. It's about getting back up. The stories are better anyway, right? Think about your life, right? It's a series of moments where you figured a way through what it is. Okay. So let's bring it all together. Articulate your why, schedule your priority, build yourself habit by habit, enjoy the journey. Articulate your why, schedule your priority, build yourself habit by habit. This is who I am today. Right? A family man, I'm a marathoner, and I love helping organizations and people become what they want. The core values out of the G-Force: growth, grit, and generosity. Right? I have goals and I'm building new habits, reshaping my environment continuously. Some things matter and some things don't. Don't get caught up in the things that don't matter. Don't let them haul you down. Don't let the people and the things that don't matter invade what does. Went through those, but something earned makes 3 simple demands. Make the best choice supported by the facts and the clarity of our goals. We accept the risk and we put in the effort, but there is no guarantee. The only guarantee is that you know you're putting in the effort. You're not sitting in the cheap seats critiquing the world. You're putting in the effort. And Brene Brown does a variation of Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena. It's a 3-minute video. It is the best video, best version of Man in the Arena that I've ever seen. And at the end of talking about the man in the arena, she says there's only one guarantee when you get in the arena. You will get your ass kicked. That's it. It's the only guarantee. But at least you're there in the arena. At least you're moving towards a life of intention, doing what you want. And it's made all the difference for me. It says 4 years in. It's an old slide. I'm 6 years in now. That's a new picture on the far right, though. There's my 2 daughters. I'll talk a little bit about how this has changed. And this one's always hard. This slide's hard for me to get through. Got 2 minutes left if you bear with me. The one on the left's easy. That's the second marathon with Shane. We ran it in LA. That was fun. We ran Chicago. I'm headed in 6 days. I'll run Santiago in Chile. I'll have 4 days by myself down in South America. And, running has become a salvation of some ilk. It's allowed me to take all the addictive principles of other things and put it towards running. Fantastic. But it also helps me chase a goal, right? So it helps me chase the goal of 8 marathons on 8 continents. Yes, New Zealand is its own continent now somehow. I don't know how they let that happen, but Zealandia. And chasing the Abbott's Major, and I'm trying to defy father time and try and run one under 3 hours. Okay, so only 2% of people run one under 3 hours. I'll try and do that. Why? I have no idea. But running is good for me, so that's great. My time's great. I went 4:15 in Athens, 3:45 in Los Angeles, 3:15 in Chicago. There is no way that the time will go down that much more in Santiago. I'll be lucky to run one in under 3:10 because the real game happens now. But that's just been since 2017, pounding the stone, running, putting the time in, kind of like life. The 2 other ones are really hard to describe, but I'll do my best to get through them. That upper one is my grandfather. 2018, we went for a visit. I hate Zephyr Hills, Florida. Hate Zephyr Hills, Florida. It's 45 minutes outside of Tampa. It's a gun country. I would rather jump in a tub full of scissors with lemon juice than go visit Zephyr Hills again. It is an awful place on earth. But my grandparents love it. Absolutely love it. And so if I wanted to spend time with them, that's where we had to go. So I went there. This is 2018. I went there for 3 days and I was supposed to fly home. My partner was staying down there, but weather intervened. I ended up down there for 2 weeks. Lots of time, lots of fun. Connected with him in a really important way. 2 weeks later, he passed away in a head-on collision. If I hadn't have lived a life of intention, I wouldn't have spent it there. Wouldn't have. Why? Zephyr Hills sucks. Why would I go there? Yada, yada, yada. I did. Right? So you see my dad down there. I could get into another tearjerker here, but we moved in. Why? Moments, memories, right? Are you spending the time with the people that matter? Are you doing things that matter? That's all we have at the end of the day, right? Moments. That's it. So I leave that with you because there's a lot of things I wouldn't have experienced in the last 7 years. There's a lot of relationships I would have torpedoed. There's a lot of false wins I would have chased without these models. I hope they help you the way they've helped me. So there you have it. I try to get through those without the tearjerker at the end, but it doesn't work. I'm happy to stick around for a few questions if you have them. You're also welcome to this deck. Just shoot me an email and I'll send it off to you. And again, happy to answer any questions from leaders who are trying to live a life of intention.